Yeah, am I audible? Yeah, okay. I hope you are able to see the shared screen. Right, so we discussed about the concept of machine dependent feature in the before discussing about the loader concepts. We will now look into the uh, machine independent features of assembler. So that would actually complete the module 1 completely. So in the machine dependent features of assembler, we looked into two aspects. One of the aspect was how the process of assembly is going to vary when instruction formats and addressing modes are going to change. That is one thing. Okay, so we saw that the process of assembly was completely different. So we had to consider the fact that the SIC bar XC machine had different instruction formats and it had different addressing modes. Okay, so the assembly process was changed accordingly. And I hope that you have followed the process of generating the object program for SIC bar XC. And then we discussed about the concept of program relocation. Now remember that program relocation in case of SIC bar XC was supported because of the fact that it uses relative addressing mode. So because it's using relative addressing mode, the advantage here is that we would not have to change the instructions if we want to load the program anywhere else, and if you want to make sure that the process the program assembly process goes well, then the program executes well. All we need to do is that we just need to load the instruction, that's it. So automatically all the things are going to be resolved because it's using relative addressing mode. Okay, because the content of PC is going to change, the content of base is going to change in the sense that they are going to contain the new address or the changed address. So obviously during calculation we'll get the correct values. So that's why the relative addressing mode instruction does not pose any issues as such. Of course, other instructions like format 1 and format 2 also does not have any issues because they don't have operand. The F1 does not have any operand, and the second one does not have any uh, memory location referred because they are register to register instructions. So obviously they don't have any issues as such. So F3 also does not have any issues because it's using relative addressing mode. So the only problem was with regard to format 4, which had direct addressing. So the direct addressing problem was resolved by using the modification record introduction, right? So modification record would actually contain M, and it would contain the starting address where the modification has to take place and the length of the address field specified in half bytes, right? So this is the modification record introduced. Now because of that, now we have a what do you mean uh, object program which contains the modification record along with the changes that needs to be done. Okay, so this will help our loader in performing the changes, right? So we already are familiar with the loader program. So loader's main concept or main job is to load the program into main memory for execution, right? So whether it be anything, we had seen that there are different varieties of loader program as well, right? So when the loader is loading the program, so once it assume that it has loaded this program, right? So it's loaded this object code at this point 4B101036, right? So it is loaded at, I believe the address is 00006, right? So it has loaded this. So once it is done with all the text record, now it has to deal with modification record, right? So the loader looks into the modification record. Okay, it sees that okay there is a modification record. So at 0007, right? So 0007 means this one. So this location. So at 0007 for the next 5 half bytes. Okay, for the 5 half bytes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. So for the 5 half bytes, it needs to add the starting address. So what it will do, it will add the starting address. So if it is loaded at 5000, then this will become 6000. 36, right? So this is how the assembler and loader are going to resolve the issues of relocating the program anywhere else in the memory where memory becomes available or where memory becomes free. So this supports the concept of multi-programming. So this is the advantage, right? So now that we have discussed about the concept of machine dependent features, now we shall look into some machine independent features of the assembler. Okay. Now what do you mean by this machine independent features of this assembler, right? So dependent feature means those features which are existing in the machine and we are taking advantage of it. So machine independent feature means these are not dependent on the machine features. Okay, they are not dependent on the machine features, or in other words, they are not dependent on the hardware. Okay, they are not dependent on the hardware or on the machine features. So these are something that would actually provide a convenience for the programmer, right? So this is something like which provides convenience for the programmer, right? So it is often convenient for programmer to be able to write okay, come to that. So basically it is called as the convenient, or it is actually meant for causing convenience for the programmer. Okay, so this is what the machine independent assembler features are. So what do you mean by this convenience, right? So convenience means even if like if these features are not there, then also you can, like, if you don't make use of these features, then also you can write programs that will execute. Okay, like for example, all the programs that we have considered previously, all those programs can be modified by taking advantage of these machine independent features. But if you do not make any modifications as such, even then those programs are going to execute. Okay, but these things will actually give you with some additional features or with some additional advantage that would actually make you to write program much more easier in SIC or in SIC bar XC. Okay, so what are those features? Let us have a look into it. So the first feature that is supported is called as literals. Okay, so just a second. Okay. So the first feature is the feature of literals. Okay. So what do you mean by a literal? So sometimes it is convenient for the programmer to be able to write the value of a constant operand as a part of the instruction. Okay, so this is one of the feature that is called as literal. Okay, so you have an operand, constant operand. So instead of making up a label for it, you are supposed to write it in a, or is it possible to write it in an instruction? So yes, I can specify the operand directly in the instruction. Such a type of operand, it would be called as a literal. Okay, so what advantage we get here is that this will actually avoid the constant to be defined elsewhere in the program and you having to create a label for it. Okay, like for example, let us observe what are all the constants that we have used in our program. Okay, so for example, in the previous program, we have used certain constants or we have defined label for it. Like for example, see here, EOF is a constant. Okay, I have defined a constant for it. So EOF is a constant. So I'm using this EOF where? Let us see. Okay, so here I'm using EOF and anywhere else I'm using EOF. Let us check. Okay, so no, only there we are using EOF. Okay, and observe here also output byte x05. So we are giving the value. So this is a constant, right? So or whatever has been defined using byte or word, all of those are nothing but constants. And of course, they have been used somewhere in the instruction, right? So what this literal actually does is this will help you to define the operand in the instruction itself. You don't have to make a label for it. So the system or the assembler is going to create a label automatically for it. Okay, in its terminology, it is going to create a label for it. So such a type of operand that you are going to specify in your instruction literally is called as a literal. Okay, so the reason why it's called as a literal is because you are stating the value of the literal, or sorry, you are stating the value of the operand literally in the instruction. So that's why it is called as a literal, right? Now in order to differentiate a literal or identify a literal, you are going to use the equal to symbol. Okay, like for example, observe here. So this is the instruction at line 45, which has been changed now. So endfill LDA is the opcode. So here it was EOF or something like this. Okay, but now what we have done is here we have made it as a literal. How do we make it as a literal? We put equal to symbol and then you define the literal, whatever you had defined later. Okay, so what this does is this defines a literal constant called as EOF. Okay, this specifies a 3-byte operand literal value which is called as EOF. Okay, similarly observe here in 215th line WU TD. So this was something like output. Okay, so this was earlier called as output. Output was nothing but it was defined as byte x05. Okay, now this was a label that I actually made. Okay, for this constant I had actually given this label, right? But now I am actually defining it here in the instruction itself. So now I need not worry about giving label names. Okay, so if you are struggling to give label names for your constants, then what you can do is you can simply use the concept of literal in order to define those constants in your program and use them in your instruction. Okay, now what is the advantage? Now you might ask the question like if operand is present in the instruction, then doesn't that mean it's an immediate operand? So that should be the question, correct? Because whenever I specify an operand in the instruction, I told that we are using the immediate addressing mode. Then how is immediate addressing mode different from a literal, correct? So that is one of the questions that needs to be answered, right? So what is the major difference between a literal and an immediate operand? So of course, the one major difference that we see is every immediate operand is defined using hash and every literal is defined using equal to symbol, correct? So now what are the differences between this and this? But before going to that, let us check in our program what are the modifications that we have done. Okay, so observe here, LDA EOF was there, but now I have defined it as a literal. So I don't have to make up a label for it. So EOF defined was completely removed. Okay, so here I have made no changes. Of course, I can make one by changing input byte xf1. So here TD input is there. So what I can do is I can simply write this as TD equal to xf1. Okay, so now I have defined a literal. So this will not be there now. So TD equal to xf1. So what that means is now I do not need this particular statement defined. Okay, so just like that, check out here TDX05. See that output statement that was present after R sub is now gone. Okay, so this is how we define a literal, right? So how do we define a literal? By using equal to symbol followed by the constant value. What's the advantage? The advantage is that I don't have to make up a label for it. So this is one of the major advantage. So who is going to make up a label for it? The assembler itself, which is handling that particular literal, is going to make up a label for it. Okay, so how it's going to handle literal, we shall look into further. Okay, now coming to the point of what's the major difference between a literal and a immediate operand. Okay, so when it comes to an immediate operand, the operand value is assembled as a part of the instruction and there is no memory reference. Okay, like for example, if I put hashtag 03, okay, for some instruction, LDA or something like this, right? So what will happen is 00, I will just assume that 000003. So this is what will happen, something like this. Okay, the operand is going to be assembled as a part of the machine instruction. Okay, so this is when it comes to immediate addressing. But with a literal, the assembler is going to generate the specified value as a constant at some memory location, and then that particular address is going to be used to assemble the instruction by either using the PC relative addressing mode or the base relative addressing mode, whichever is applicable. Okay, like for example, if I put LDA equal to 03, what will happen is assembler or X03 or something like this. So assembler is going to first generate a constant in some memory location. Okay, so this is the program. So assembler is going to, let me assume that this is at 1000. So maybe this program ends at 2000. Okay, so what the assembler will do is first at 2003. Okay, assuming that there is an instruction here. So at 2003, it will first generate the value of this literal. Okay, so what is the value? Value is 03. And then this is going to use this address 2003 that is generated, and it is going to assemble this instruction by using PC or base relative, because this is displacement, right? So how far away the generated value is, so that is nothing but displacement. So obviously for displacement we are going to use relative addressing mode. Either it's going to be a PC addressing mode or a base relative addressing mode. So this is the difference. So when I come across an immediate operand, it gets assembled in the instruction directly, no memory reference. But when it comes to an which is this literal, okay, first the literal is going to be generated somewhere in the memory, and then that generated value or that assigned address is going to be used to assemble this particular instruction, either by PC or a base relative addressing mode. Okay, so this is what the major difference between an immediate operand and a literal is. Okay, now also remember that all the literal operands that are used in the program are actually generated or gathered together into one or more literal pools, and they are going to be usually present at the end of the program. Okay, like for example, if you have a program, okay, so let me assume that you have a program and your program has certain instructions which uses literals. Okay, so let me assume that there are three instructions in my program that are using literals. Okay, so what will happen is the address for them are going to be generated for those. Okay, I'll just write this as 1, 2 and 3 for your reference: literal 1, literal 2 and literal 3. So once the program is over, this is the end of the program. So once the program is over, so literal 1, 2 and 3 are going to be generated at the end of the program. Okay, so at the end of the program, and this collection is actually called as a literal pool. Okay, so this is actually called as a literal pool, right? So that's what the last point is. So normally literals are placed into a pool at the end of the program. So they're going to be gathered together into literal pools, and that literal pool normally be at the end of the program. Now, if you are placing all the literals at the end of the program, there might be an issue. What is the issue? Your literal value generated might be very far away from the instruction, giving us larger displacement. Okay, so this is the problem. So what would happen if you have larger displacement? If you have larger displacement, possibility is that we may not be able to assemble using either PC or base. Okay, so this is the problem. So if the displacement is large, okay, program if it is large, then obviously end of the program is going to contain all the literals. So end might be very far away from the instruction that is actually referring to that. So in that case, neither PC nor base relative addressing mode is going to work. Okay, so this is the problem. So what is the solution for that? Can we have an alternate solution for that? Okay, so yes, there is an alternate solution for that. So what is it? Okay, it is that we are supposed to use one more assembler directive now. Okay, we are already familiar with few assembler directives like start, end, byte, okay, word, reserve byte. Okay, and we are also familiar with one more assembler directive which is base. After that, you need to specify which value you are placing in the base register. Okay, in our example, we had placed the length value. Okay, so this is one assembler directive that indicates that this value is placed in the base register. Okay, before that we had actually placed into the base register the value of length, hash length. So this was the instruction. Okay, so this was one more assembler directive that we had come across. Now we are looking at one more assembler directive, which is LTORG. Okay, so this is LTORG, right? So what is this LTORG? Let us have a look into it. Let me just okay, so what is LTORG, right? So LTORG is that assembler directive that will actually tell the assembler to place the literal values that it has encountered so far immediately after the LTORG statement. Okay, so in other words, what happens is, see, in earlier cases, just a second. Okay, so in earlier cases, what would happen is, if my program had, for example, three literal values, okay, 1, 2, and 3, I'm just writing. So this is the end of the program. So literals would be placed at the end, right? So 1, 2, and 3, or it would be generated at the end and then it would be assembled. Okay, so instructions would actually refer to these. Okay, uh, as I said, this would be called as the literal pool. Now we have an option of placing the instruction, of placing the literal value closer to the instruction, okay, or wherever I want. Okay, like for example, if I put LTORG statement here, okay, if I put LTORG statement here, what will happen is, up to this point, up to this point, whichever literals was seen by the assembler, all those would be placed here itself. All those would be placed here itself. Okay, which means that now the instructions need not look at the end of the program, they can immediately look here. Okay, or in other words, look at the displacement. See, this is a smaller displacement when compared with this one, which is a larger displacement. Okay, so this is the advantage of using the LTORG statement. So let us check here, see what has happened. See here, can you check out where are the literals? Okay, all you need to do is just check for the equal to symbol. Okay, so of course this is hash, this is hash. Okay, now we have a literal here, right? Okay, so this value has to be generated somewhere. So let us check where it is generated. So we go further and we now see a LTORG statement. Okay, so when it sees an LTORG statement up to this point, up to this point, how many literals were there? Only one literal is there, right? So that is placed immediately after this instruction. Okay, so now what does it mean? It means that now our instruction can actually refer to this location, or it refers to this location. So this is the displacement now. Suppose if this statement was not there, okay, if the statement was not there, then this CEOF would be generated at the end of the program. Okay, it would be generated at the end of the program, right? So this is the problem. So at 1076 we have x05, see something like this. So maybe before this, that x EOF would have been generated. Okay, or sorry, CEOF would have been generated. So how far away it would have been from the instruction. Okay, so this is the advantage of using the LTORG statement, right? So that is how literal are handled and ensured that they are closer to the instruction by making use of the LTORG assembler directive. Okay, now let's look at the further part of the program. Okay, no literal has been used here. Okay, so we'll assume that it has been not used here. So here it is used TD x05 WD x05. Okay, no LTORG statement is present anywhere here. So obviously this is the end of the program. So at the end of the program we have the literal placed. Okay, so it is at x05 is actually stored at 107, right? So this is how literals are actually used. Right? Just a second. I hope I'm audible. Okay. B section. Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Right. So now the literal has ensured that we need not worry about the labels. It can be automatically generated by our assembler. So this is the convenience that the programmer would actually get. Okay, you need not make up names for labels like this. So if you want to define a constant, okay, of course not for these labels. If you want to define a constant and you don't want to make a name for it, then you can simply use the concept of literal. Okay, so this is the basic advantage or convenience that the programmer actually gets. Okay, so now there are certain scenarios where you can actually make use of literals, when and where to use them. They have been given. You can strictly follow this while using the concept of literals. So when to use it? First one, the literal operand would be placed too far away from the instruction referencing. Okay, so if you have an operand and if you know that it would be placed very far away from the instruction, then you can use the concept of literal and the LTORG statement to place the instruction and the constant closer, okay, or the literal closer to each other. So that is one place where you can use it. So cannot use if the instruction cannot use PC relative addressing mode or base relative addressing mode for generating the object program, then you can use the concept of literal. So how? As I said, LTORG solves the issue, correct? So if you have an instruction here and the operand here, then you have a larger displacement. Okay. So what you can do is, instruction is here, make it as a literal. Okay, use the LTORG statement anywhere you want, which is closer to that particular instruction. So constant would be generated here, displacement would be very less. So for smaller displacement, which can use PC or base relative addressing mode, you can actually use the concept of literal. Okay. The third one is the need for an assembler directory such as LTORG usually arises when it is desirable to keep the literal operand closer to the instruction that uses it. Okay, so of course all the three things I've already discussed about. So these are the times where you are supposed to use, or where and when you are supposed to use the concept of literal. Okay, now one of the thing is that the constants that are generated as literal, they don't have a name. If you add observed here, see here, they don't have a name. They just have a memory address. Okay, so when it comes to a literal, then there may be certain operands which are identical or which may be duplicate values. So how does the assembler recognize these duplicate values? Okay, like for example, see here, if you have a value like CEOF, okay, so equal to CEOF, now this would actually generate an object code when we assemble the instruction 45464F. Sorry, 454F46. So this would be generated. Okay. Now suppose if I am using this in my instruction X454F46. If I am using this in the instruction, then this also will generate 454F46. Okay, there is no difference between the object code that is generated. Okay, so is it a duplicate, or does the assembler consider these two as duplicate values? No. Okay, it cannot differentiate between this one and this one. Okay, even though the values that are going to be generated are same, so the assembler is going to generate this one as a separate literal and this one as a separate literal. Okay, so the same literals used in more than one place are going to be stored only once. Suppose for example, if CEOF comes or it is defined two times. Okay, like let me check here. See here, the value of x05 is used in two different instructions, but both of them are x05 only. Okay, both of them are x05 only. So the assembler knows that this is a duplicate symbol. So obviously it might be generated, and it is generated at the end of the program. So it generates them only one time, does not generate them two times. Okay, but If it is the case like this, which I mentioned at the top, CEOF and X454F46, okay, even though these two generate the same object code, they are completely different values. Okay, so this is a character, this is a hexadecimal. So obviously both of them are not duplicates, right? So they will be generated differently. So that is how the literal is going to handle the duplicate values. If they are exact duplicate, then it will be generated only once. But if it's not, then they are going to be generated separately by the assembler. Okay, so that is one thing. And you can also use the current value of location counter to assign the current address for any or it can be used for defining any literal. Okay, like for example, LDB equal to star that is present here means that you are supposed to assemble or generate the current value of location counter as the literal value. Okay, so star here, just see here, star means current value of location counter. So here I am storing into the base register the current value of location counter. So what would happen? Current value of location counter would be generated and it would be stored in the base register. Okay, so this is one more advantage that we can, or this is one more convenient strategy that we can actually adopt in case of literals. Okay, now just like the symbol table and op table, we have one more table to deal with now if we are using the concept of literals, or the assembler has to deal with if it is handling the concept of literals. So the table is actually called as literal table, okay, or lit tab. So this literal table would actually contain the following things. One thing is it would contain the name of the literal. Okay, so it would actually contain the same thing whichever you have defined in your instruction, whatever the value of that is. Okay, like for example, CEOF object code value is 454F, 4S, 46, and then it is going to have the length stored and the address that has been generated. So these are going to be the content of the literal table. So what are they? Name of the literal, value of the literal, okay, length of the literal, and the address that is currently assigned to it. So with this information, it will be easier for the assembler to assemble the instruction during pass 2. Okay, and as usual, it is also organized as hash table, and how the literals are handled during pass 1 and pass 2 has been spoken down here. So during pass 1, the assembler would search the literal table, which is this, okay, for the specified literal name. So if it encounters an LTORG statement or the end of the program, then the assembler makes a scan of the literal table. Okay, so this is what happens during pass 1. During pass 2, the operand address for use in generating the object code is obtained by looking into the literal table. So what it actually means is during pass 1, we whenever we come across a literal, okay, we will handle it only when we see the LTORG statement or the end of the program. So as soon as we see an LTORG, let us assume that we don't see an LTORG statement. So if we see an end of the program, then we normally record all the literals that we have seen so far. Okay, or else if we see a LTORG statement, up to that point, whichever literal has been seen, all those things are going to be recorded. So then later at the end of the program, the remaining part, if it contains any literal, then they are going to be recorded. So once these informations are recorded during pass 1, during pass 2, the same thing is going to be used during object code assembly. Okay, so this is how the concept of literals are actually used. Okay, now one more feature or convenience that is provided by the assembler is it enables programmers to define certain symbols using different assembler directives. Okay, right now or till now, how we have defined symbols? Let us have a look into it. So as you can observe here, symbols, whether it be a constant or a variable, how have we declared it? Okay, so we have declared them using either byte, okay, either byte or reserve byte or word. Okay, so reserve byte or word. Of course, we haven't come across any such symbol like this which you are seeing right now on the screen, EQ. Okay, so how do we define symbol? We define symbol either by using byte or word or reserve byte or reserve word. Of course, we had seen a new way, which is literal, for defining the constants. Okay, but now we shall see one more type of assembler directive that can be used to define the symbols in your program. Okay, so symbols along with their values in your program. So what is that assembler directive? So that assembler directive is called as equate. Okay, so now you can use this assembler directive instead of word byte or reserve byte or etc. So the syntax that you are supposed to follow is, first you have to give the symbol or the name of the symbol, then you have to use the equate assembler directive, then it should be followed by the value for which this symbol, for the symbol to be assigned. Okay, now what's the advantage of using this? See, I already have certain assembler directives that can actually be used to define the symbol. But why do I need this now? Okay, so one advantage of using this equate assembler directive or EQU is that it would improve the readability of the program. Okay, now if you remember, when you are writing the program, C programs or something like this, let me assume I have main. Okay, I will write int um, um, some a as some 10. Okay, a as some 10, right? And some b as 10. Okay, I have defined two arrays, something like this. Okay, so what is 10 here? What is 10? 10 is the maximum number of elements that this array can actually have. Okay, here also in B, 10 is the maximum number of elements that the array can actually have, right? Now, of course, there is no problem with this program, but now let me write this program in a different way. Okay, so first I will do hash define max 10. Okay, then main, and then int a of max and int b of max. Okay, now of course both the programs does the same thing. They declare an array with size 10. But what is the difference between the first one and the second one? Okay, if you observe the first one and the second one, there is a difference in readability. Readability means if somebody goes through your program, okay, so they can understand that okay, some maximum size has been defined and the size of the array is this. Okay, of course I can get that information from the first program also, that a is of size 10 and b is of size 10. But now let us consider a second scenario. Second scenario is where I have to modify the size from 10 to 100. Okay, I have to modify the size of the array from 10 to 100. So look at how many changes I make. So here I make one change, which is 100, and of course here I make one more change, which is 100. So two changes I had to make. Now suppose if I had that 10 defined in more than one statement, then in all those statements I had to make the change. Okay. In contrast, look at the second program. Okay, now if here, if I want to make any changes to the size of the array from 10 to 100, all I have to do is I just have to redefine the max statement to 100. That's it. Automatically, all the changes are going to be reflected, right? Now, which one is better? You choose whether it's the first one or whether it's the second one. So obviously, second one would be a better choice, because when you write your programs, you do not write it for yourself, you write it for somebody, and when somebody else goes through your program, they have to understand it. Okay, so second program has that readability, improved readability, which I was discussing about. Okay, so by using the equate assembler directive, you will get this advantage of improved readability. Like for example, check here, if I have a statement like plus LDT hash 4096, now I know that 4096 is the maximum length of the buffer. What I will do is I will define a variable called as max length equate 4096, which is nothing but something like what I have done here, hashtag define max 10, something like this, right? So now I will use in my statement plus LDT hashtag max length. So this improves the readability of the program. If I look into this instruction, I don't know what is 4096. But now I know that I'm loading into register T the maximum length of something. Okay, it can be a buffer or it can be something else, but I would know that I'm loading something which is a maximum length. Okay, so this would improve the readability of the program. So this is one of the advantage of using the um, equate assembler directive. Okay, not just that, you can also use it to rename your registers. Okay, like for example, check out if I have an instruction like RMO A comma X, then what I can do is I know that this A and X value are going to be 0 and 1. So what I'm doing here is I will directly equate that value to 0, and I will directly equate that value to 1. I will directly equate L value to 2. So directly I can put them in my instruction. Okay, or directly I can use the values 0 and 1 in the instruction. So this is one more advantage. Of course, here you may not see any advantage, but assume a system that has general purpose registers. Okay, like for example, R1, R2 up to R10 or R20 or something like this. So when you have so many general purpose registers, and if you want to use these registers as a specific type of register, okay, like for example, I want to use R1 as my base register. There is no, assuming that there is no specific base register in this system, all are general purpose registers, then I want R1 to be used as my base register. Okay, and I want R2 to be used as a counter, and I want R3 to be used as an index register. Then what I can do is I can simply use the equate assembler directive to rename these values, register values or register names, to their corresponding values or names I want. So this is one more advantage of using the symbol defining statement equate. Okay. Now one more symbol defining statement is there. It is called as ORG. So what is this ORG? So this ORG is called as origin, okay, which is used to indirectly assign the address for the symbols. Okay, which is used to
Sure.
indirectly assign the values for the symbols. Now, just like equate, this also has a syntax. So first it is org, and then you have to specify the value to which the location counter value has to be reset. Okay, so it is something like this. So you know that location counter value is used to assign the address, right? Okay, let me assume that this is the program. So program A. So location counter value is assigning the address. So it assigns the value to this, it assigns the value to this, and this. Okay. Now if I use org, and then let me assume that this is some value 1000. Okay, so this is 2000, this is 3000, something like this. Now if I use org 1000, then the location counter value from here is going to be changed back to this. Okay, now from here I can do address assignment again, okay, or a different address assignment. So this is the advantage of using org. So it indirectly assigns the values to the symbols by resetting the value of the location counter to the specified value. Okay. Now where it's going to be helpful? It's going to be helpful when we are defining a label. Okay. Like for example, this is a typical example that is present. So what happens here is, let us look into this. There's a table that's called as stab. Let us call this a symbol table, short. It has three fields. It has the symbol, it has value, and it has flags. So symbol is a 6-byte field, value is a 3-byte field, and flag is a 2-byte field. And there are around 100 entries in this particular table. So how do I define this table? Now there are two ways. The first way is that I can use the equate assembler directive and define that particular table. How? The first statement would look something like this. So at address 1000, S tab, reserve byte, 1100. Okay, 100 for the entries, and the remaining extra is for the header. Okay. Okay, so we have reserved around 1100 bytes. So that's the entire location. Okay, so 1100 bytes for entire location. Okay, S tab. So this is at address 1000, right? But now I want to define the headers and use them as index if required. So how do I do that? So at 1000 I will say symbol equate to S tab. Okay, so means whatever address has been assigned to S tab, same address is assigned to symbol. And how much it is? The size is 6 byte. Okay, so then value equated to what? Wherever S tab is plus 6 byte, correct? If this is S tab, if this is the beginning of it, right? Then 6 bytes later, I will find value. Okay, how much is value? Value is 3 byte. So 3 bytes later, 3 bytes later means from this reference point, 6 plus 3, 9. Okay, after 9 bytes, I will find flag value. So I am explicitly defining the index. See here, flags equated to S tab plus 9. Okay, now this will work. There is no problem with it, but there is no clear definition. So S tab is the only reference, and the way we have defined our columns is with regard to this value of S tab. Okay, so obviously, if you want to access these fields, then we are supposed to use the indexed addressing mode because we have defined all the indexes as S tab plus 6 and S tab plus 9. Would actually use the value of indexed addressing mode to fetch the value field or the flag field from the uh, table. Okay, so this is how we would normally do it if we did not have org. Okay, so with org it would look something like this. Okay, so whatever we have done here, same thing we are doing here, but this time we are using org for that. Okay, so as you can observe here, at this address we have a statement called as stab reserve byte 1100. Okay, now we are redefining. See, 1000 bytes have been reserved. So now what we are supposed to do is we are supposed to break them down into 3 columns. Okay, so we need to assign that this is symbol, this is value, and this is flag. So how are we going to do that? So org yes tab. So what does it mean? See, when this statement is executed, so 1000 plus how many bytes we are reserving? 1100. So 1000 plus 1100. So let me assume 2100. So the location pointer value will be here after that statement. But once you see the assembler directory org stab, it will be what do you call it? It will be reset. Okay, it will be reset to which value? Stab. What is stab value? Stab value is 1000. So once again we are coming back to 1000. Okay, now the location counter value is here. So now I know that symbol value is around 6 bytes. So instead of using equate, now I am defining it clearly that symbol would require 6 byte. And what is the value of value field? Value field is one word or 3 bytes. 3 bytes is nothing but one word. So I can directly use reserve word 1. Okay. And then flags is there which requires around 2 bytes. So I will reserve byte 2. Or I have mentioned where exactly these things are without using this reference. Okay. So without using this particular reference, I have redefined it. Okay, so now because I had, see, now the location counter value is here. So now I was the one who reset the value of location counter. So it is my responsibility to reset the location counter value back to the location where it actually should be. Okay, so that's why once again we will have the org statement, but this time org does what? It will reset the value of location counter, right? So this time it will be stab plus 1100, which is actually where we had earlier the value of location counter. Okay, so this is your job, because if you have reset the value of location counter, it is your job to reset the value of location counter again. If you don't do that, then address assignment would actually begin from here. So obviously this table would contain the instructions that actually should follow. So it would be wrong. So obviously it is your responsibility not to make that happen. Okay. So this and this, previously whatever we have defined, is both similar, but this one gives us a clear definition. That's it. Okay, so that's the only advantage of using org here. It gives us a clear reference and clear definition when compared with the previous case. Okay, so this is one of the advantage of using the equate assembler directive and the org assembler directive. Now, when you're using these two, you need to be careful. Okay, so for example, check here, we have alpha defined, one of the variable. So how is that defined? Reserve word 1. Okay, now I can make another variable beta same as alpha by using equate assembler directive. So this is fine. Okay, this is something like in your program, int a is equal to 10. Okay, int b is equal to a. Okay, something like this. Int b is equal to a, right? So I have defined a is equal to 10. I have defined alpha, b is equal to a. Okay, or beta is equal to alpha. So this is something like this. Okay, I've just given a comparison with your high-level programming language. But this is not allowed. Okay, beta equated to alpha, and then I'm defining alpha. So this is not wrong, because when I'm equating the value of alpha to beta, then I want alpha to be defined first. So here alpha is defined later. So obviously it cannot be assembled. So this instruction cannot be assembled because at this particular point alpha value would not be known. So obviously it would need more than 2 pass design. Okay, so obviously this is wrong, should not happen. So if you are equating some value, then just ensure that this value is defined earlier. Okay, now same thing happens with org also. So for example, here check org alpha I have defined, but alpha is defined later. So this cannot happen. So I cannot reset the value of location counter to a place which I do not know, because alpha is not present anywhere before, because alpha is present here, right? So since it is not present anywhere here, obviously alpha value would be unknown. So in this case, it would raise an error. Okay, or we will obviously do not have any value to set the location counter. So that's why this is one of a error and should not happen. So whatever values you are trying to define or equate using org or eq, ensure that they have been defined at the beginning. Okay, so this is one of the care that you need to take when you are using the symbol defining statement. Okay, so I believe next is expression, but we'll discuss that in the next session. Let me take the attendance. Meanwhile, do you have any doubts regarding the concepts that we have discussed so far?